Hey guys, what's up? Greg here at the Vinyl Rundown. Guess what I got for you today? Another giant collection of records that we just acquired. Turns out a relative of ours moved out of town and gave us all their records, so thank you very much. Won't mention you by name, but initials BAS, you know who you are. Thank you so much, really appreciate it. The moral of this story is let all your family and friends know that you collect records, and they'll start giving you collections of records. It actually has happened quite a few times in the last couple of years, so thank you again. I'm going to go through this record by record real quick, and this is a pretty interesting collection. It goes back quite a few years and is pretty eclectic, so let's take a look at them up close. Okay, I've unwrapped these, and we're just going to go through them in the order that they were packed in, more or less. So the record on the top, Abbey Road, obviously. The good news is this is my favorite Beatles record, so this is a pretty good sign that this collection is going to be pretty nice. So 2 Abbey Roads in a row. That's interesting. It's getting better. Another Beatle record, Let It Be. Well, Beatles' probably last album, the famous Concert on the Roof. This is in pretty good shape. I've listened to some of these. Let me let you know, I have listened to and cleaned a lot of these and put some of these in nice sleeves. Not all of them, but I did go through this, so that's why they're in nice sleeves. So this is a nice one. Meet the Beatles. The nice thing about this one is this is a mono copy. All the rest of these are stereo, but the early Beatles stuff in mono is actually more valuable, so good to hear the Beatles in mono sometimes. And then we have the classic pair of Rubber Soul and Revolver, 2 of the greatest albums ever, if you're a Beatle fan. And then Magical Mystery Tour, the very bizarre movie. First came out as an EP in England and then was released with more songs on it in the US. I Am the Walrus, most famous song on here. I guess they're dressed up as walruses, walrusi. And this does include the booklet. There is a full booklet in here, so that's cool. And then a much better movie, The Beatles Help, probably their best, most loved movie. Great tunes on there. Then we come to one of the prizes of this collection. This is a record you might not be familiar with. Introducing the Beatles. This was actually released in England. Now I can't remember. I think it was it Meet the Beatles or was it the Beatles, one of their first records. But it was released in the US and in England with different covers. And the weird thing is, this does not say Capitol or Polydor on it. It says VJ. So the brilliant people at Capitol EMI did not want to release the Beatles in the United States because they didn't think the Beatles were going to amount to very much. So they sold the rights to the early Beatle records to this company called VJ. And so VJ put it out with different cover art. And VJ did some other records, some different jazz records and pop and soul records, but not that well known of a label probably. All right, so 9 great Beatle records. Then we come to the rest of the collection. Pop music, how about Elton John's greatest hits? I listened to this one and it's suffering from a bit of groove rot, so this is not sounding that good. Harry Chapin, Cats in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon, that song is not on here. So these are some other Harry Chapin tunes I'm not that familiar with. Now we're getting into some later stuff, late 70s, 80s, Dirty Dancing. Patrick Swayze's big record that had Time of My Life on it. Then another soundtrack, Pretty Baby. Brooke Shields, kind of her, I guess that was her breakout movie. She was, 11 or 12 years old? And this is mostly like sort of ragtime, Scott Joplin, Dixieland jazz. Not my favorite. All right, now we're coming to something pretty cool. So this is King Crimson's first record, one of the most popular, or I should say iconic, early progressive rock albums with a great album cover, great artwork. And this has Robert Fripp on it. And actually on vocals was Greg Lake of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So this sounds a little bit like an ELP record, but Pretty cool record. First one from King Crimson, and they're actually still touring, 40, 50 years later with a slightly different lineup. But Fripp is still with the band. And then on the theme of progressive rock, here's a progressive prog band that's not that well known. Gentle Giant, Three Friends. I don't know if I like this leprechaun dude all that much. The artwork is kind of weird. I listened to this. If you're really into progressive rock, you might like this. I certainly like Yes and all that stuff. But anyway, this record is probably one of the more valuable ones here because this is pretty rare. Not that many people know Gentle Giant. All right, now we're coming into a giant section of female poppy, folky stuff. Judy Collins, more Judy Collins. How about some more Judy Collins? I'm not that familiar with her stuff, so I'm breezing through these because there's a bunch of them. And then Joni Mitchell, who is she still alive? She's been in really poor health. Joni Mitchell, Joan Baez. This is like a threesome of poppy, folky ladies by coincidence. And then one of the weirdest records of all time, Richard Harris. This is the record with MacArthur Park on it. Everybody knows that weird song, MacArthur Park. Someone left the cake out on the rain. That's this record. Richard Harris was actually a Shakespearean actor. And why did he want to get into pop singing? Not sure anybody knows. But famous record because of that song. Actually, all these songs are written by Jimmy Webb. It says here, all new Jimmy Webb originals. Jimmy Webb wrote Wichita Lineman, By the Time I Get to Phoenix, and Galveston, which all made Glenn Campbell a superstar. And then he did this whole album for Richard Harris. So MacArthur Park, actual park in Los Angeles, downtown. And then Donna Summer did the tune, Made It Disco. Then we have pretty good sounding record. I listened to this one. George Shearing, the famous piano player. Supposedly this is his first live recording, which I find hard to believe, but that's what the album cover notes say. This was recorded on the college campus of Claremont College near Los Angeles. Sounds pretty good. I cleaned this one up and listened to it, and it sounds good. It's kind of an after dinner, have a martini 50s kind of a jazz. So this record is 60 years old, and it's just amazing that vinyl still sounds that good after that length of time. Try that with CDs in 60 years and tell me how that works out. Then we come to a section of big band stuff. So these records are kind of old, but in reality, the music is much older. A lot of these big band things were recorded on 78 RPM in the 30s and 40s and then reissued on LP, probably the 50s or 60s. So Artie Shaw reissued, huge big band guy in the 40s. Oh, this has an interesting inscription on it up in the corner here. To and from. So this record was given to my wife's grandfather by one of his daughters back in 1970. And my wife's grandfather actually had his own big band in the 30s and 40s. And I have some of those 78 RPM records floating around. Maybe I will play those for you someday. Okay, more Artie Shaw. Let's see. So check this out. This is a great looking cover with this very charming young lady. And the funny thing on this cover is, can you see the giant scar on her shoulder? Back in the olden days, everybody had to get a polio shot, and she's showing off her shoulders, but she's got the giant scar, which I think is kind of funny, but maybe not. All right, more. This is kind of a big band greatest hits thing. Longines Symphonette. They released a lot of sort of budget stuff, I guess in the 50s or 60s. There's a huge series of these. They're worth not too much. Here's a great looking cover. The Dorsey Brothers. What is it? Jimmy Dorsey and Tommy Dorsey. horn players, big band stuff from the 50s again. And then another big band. Woody Herman. He was big in the 30s and 40s, but this record is from the 70s, kind of the tail end of his career when trying to remain relevant, which is not easy to do during the disco era. But he plays some cool tunes on here. There's a couple of Coltrane songs, Naima, song for Coltrane's wife. There's a Carole King song on here. There's a Frank Zappa song on here that I'm not even familiar with. America Drinks and Goes Home by Zappa. This record actually doesn't sound too bad, although it's pretty scratched up. Copy of My Fair Lady, the Broadway show, because the rain in Spain. I think you know where the rain in Spain stays. So, Bonnie Tyler, she had one hit, It's a Heartache. One hit, a whole album. Who knows what else is on there. Then we come to a couple of classical records. Prokofiev, Russian composer. This is not one of his most well-known pieces. This is a ballet that I'm not really familiar with. Bolshoi Theater Orchestra. All right, I'll check it out. Oh, it's on the Melodia label, which is a Russian, like the Russian state-owned Soviet label. And they did licensing deals with some different U.S. companies. So the Melodia releases themselves are not on great vinyl, but if it's a U.S. or U.K. company, probably sounds all right. This is a pretty famous record, at least in its day. Van Cliburn was this young piano player who got really famous when he won this giant piano playing competition and became a household name overnight. So this is the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto No. 1 and RCA Victor. We'll check that out. More classical piano. Vladimir Horowitz doing miscellaneous piano sonata type stuff. All right, we'll check that out. Linda Ronstadt. She had a lot of hits in the 70s. This record had a couple of hits on it. This has You're No Good and When Will I Be Loved. But what I just noticed on here, it also has Willin', written by Lowell George, made famous by Little Feat. Give Me Weeds, White and Wine, if you know that tune. It's been covered by a lot of people, but that's a pretty cool song. I've got to check that out. Then the last thing in this list is a handful of records by a guy you probably have not heard of, Paul Robeson. He's most well known for singing Old Man River, which was in a musical back in probably the 20s or 30s. With that big booming bass voice, Old Man River. I won't sing for you, promise. But what I didn't know about him is that he actually played NFL football, and then he became a lawyer, and then he gave up on law because he said because of racism he couldn't practice law in the 20s. So then he became an actor and singer, and then also became closely associated with the civil rights movement, and he annoyed the U.S. government because he spent a lot of time hanging out with the Russians and the Soviets. And most people today might not know who he is. But there he is, Paul Robeson. So anyway, guys, 30 or 40, probably 40 records that we just received as a gift from somebody. Very grateful to be receiving those, so thank you very much. And I got to still clean and catalog some of these, and it's a lot of work. But hey, it's worth it because great Beatle collection and some other miscellaneous cool stuff. A lot of listening to do. So thanks, and we will check you out later.